All right, 7th graders, we're going to work our way through the algebra packet here. And as we go along, I'm going to have you answer some questions along the way. As we look at number 1, it asks which represents a proportional relationship. Remember that a proportional relationship is a linear graph that goes through the origin. So which one of these would represent a proportional relationship? If you selected A, you would be correct. A is a proportional relationship because it goes through the origin and it is a linear graph. By linear, it means a straight line. So using what you know there, which one in number 2 would be an example of a proportional relationship? If you came up with graph 3, you would be correct. Again, it goes through the origin and is a straight line. Now in number 3, it asks you to graph the line of the equation. A couple things that you should notice about this. Well, first of all, this is a proportional relationship. And what have we been talking about when it comes to proportional relationships? We talked about how they had to go through the origin. So we automatically know that this is going to go through the origin of the graph. But another way, if you didn't know that and wanted to approach it, is that the x and y that are on here, they stand for ordered pairs that make that statement true. So I want to pick any value for x that falls in my graph. So maybe I'm going to start with the number 3. So if I pick 3 for my x, then I go up here and I stick a 3 in for x. Well, this really means y equals 2 times x. So in the case of if x is 3, this would be 2 times 3. So the value of y would be 6. What I've just created there is an ordered pair that makes that statement true. So I could graph that by going over 3 and up 6 to get a point there. Okay. Well, that's not quite enough to make a line, so maybe I want to pick a different point. Maybe I'm going to pick the point -2. So if I pick the point -2, I take the -2 in and I stick it in for x. 2 times a -2. Well, remember, a positive times a negative is going to be negative. So my next ordered pair that I'm going to plot would be at -2 and down 4. We can see how they start to form a line. Let's pick one more. If I were to put a 1 in for x, could you tell me what the value of y is going to be? If you said 2, you would be correct because 2 times 1 is 2. So I'm going to go over 1 and up 2. That would be enough right now to plot the line. So then I would connect those to form a nice straight linear line to represent that equation. One other thing you're going to notice in that equation, that 2 is something called slope that we'll talk about next year, or maybe at the end of this year. And what you're going to notice is 2 as a fraction is like 2 over 1. So if I look at this graph, you're going to see that 2 over 1. You're going to see that I went up 2 and over 1 to get to the next point. Up 2 and over 1 would get me to this point. Up 2 and over 1. The idea of slope is rise over run. How far up and over you go. A little different or backwards from how you graph a point, but more to come on that. Which one of these represents a proportional relationship? Well, remember, in a proportional relationship, when we did y divided by x, we always got a constant amount, the same amount. So the one that represents our y divided by x would be d. And the two numbers divided by each other gives us a constant amount, or 3. Right. Number 5 took us back to simplifying. So when we take a look at simplifying this, the first thing we see is we have some subtraction here, and then we have some multiplication. Well, which comes first? Subtraction or multiplication in order of operations? If you said multiplication, you'd be correct. So the first thing we're going to have to do is distribute this -2 to each of these items. So I'm going to have 8. And negative 2 times n would be a negative 2n. And then negative 2 times a positive 4 would be a negative 8. And then I'd have all of that. And I'm actually going to write this as like 8 plus a negative 2n minus 8, because all of this still is being multiplied by negative 3 to the second power. And so if we think about doing that power, what would negative 3 to the second power be? Well, that would be negative 3 times negative 3, which is a positive 9. So we could rewrite our problem as 8 plus a negative 2n minus 8, because adding a negative is the same as subtracting, times 9. Well, now we have our addition here and our multiplication. Multiplication still comes first. So now I have to distribute the 9 to each of those terms. So it's almost like I had to do double distributing. Once from the left and once from the right. So I'm going to get 8, and then a 9 times a negative 2 would be negative 18n. And a 9 times a negative 7 would be negative 72. So now if I combined my like terms, what would I get if I combined my like terms to get a simplified expression? If you came up with negative 18n, because remember, it's the only one that has the variable, I can combine the 8 and the negative 72. If I'm at 8 and I take away 72, I'm now at negative 64. So the answer for this one would be C. Number 6 was a similar type of problem. They are distributing two numbers. What would you get if you distributed the 3 to begin with? If you distributed the 3, you would get 3x plus 6. And now what are we distributing in the next one? Remember up above how I talked about subtracting is the same as adding a negative. So really what we're distributing here is a negative 1 that's in front of the parentheses. So a negative 1 times x would be a negative x, and a negative times a negative would be a positive 4. Combining my like terms, what would I get? Well, 3x minus an x would be 2x. And then I have a positive 6 and a positive 4, which would be 10. So now I need to think about which one of these expressions, and notice it said select the expression, so there's probably multiple answers here that match this. Can you find which ones match this? Well, it's obvious that E would be an example, because that matches exactly. Now we have to look at the other ones. Well, this one is adding 2. This one has a 4x instead of a 2x. If I distributed the 2 here, I get 2x minus 2. What if I distribute the 2 here? 2x plus 10. Well, yep, that'd be the same. This one, what am I distributing? I'm distributing a half. So the question is, what is half of 4? That's 2. So it'd be 2x. And what's half of 20? That's 10. So all three of those would be a expression that matches the simplified expression that we began with. Number 7 now, if we take a look at that one, says the equation y equals 12x plus 60 can be used to estimate y is the height of a tree in centimeters and x is the month after it is planted. When a tree is 150 centimeters tall, how long ago was the tree planted? So we're going to start with our equation. Remember, we talked about in the formula packet, if they give you an equation, it's important that you use that. It's like their way of saying this is how you solve it. What we now have to see is it's saying when the tree is 150 centimeters. So would the 150 go in place of the y or in place of the x? Well, the one being measured in centimeters up here is the height. So we're going to put it in place of the y. So I would get 150 equals 12x plus 60. Now that I have only one variable remaining, I can use my algebra to solve. So use your algebra, and what would you get for an answer? Or if you want a little test-taking strategy, if you can get this far and it's a multiple choice question, you can take these numbers and plug them in for x and see which one gives you 150. Remember that this means to multiply. I'm going to use my algebra. So I'm going to start with what's furthest from the variable, which is the 60. And I get 90 equals 12x. The opposite of multiplying by 12 is to divide by 12. So I get 7.5 equals x, which would be A. Number 8 is a similar type of problem. Here's your equation. So they're saying here is how you solve it. Given the relationship between C, which is the weight of the clay, and S, which is the weight of the sand in a mixture, there is 6.25 pounds of clay in the mixture. So what letter would you put the 6.25 in for? If you said C, you would be correct. Remember, it means to multiply when you see a number next to a variable. So 3 times 6.25 is going to equal 4s. And we want to find out what is the value of s. So we can multiply this together to begin with, and that is 18.75. Here's where you want to watch, because notice that 18.75 shows up here. But 18.75 isn't the weight of the sand, because notice don't have s alone right now. We're still multiplying by 4. So we're going to divide by 4, and we find out that it is 4.6875 is the value of s. Well, I don't see this over here, but I can see that if I take the 8, and because there's a 7 to the right and round up, the answer would be A. Right? 2 more problems to look at. The next one shows the table shows the cost of different number of boxes of cookies. What is the cost to buy 15 boxes of cookies? A couple different ways to approach that. One way to approach it is to say, well, I could take 11.25 and divide it by 5 and find out that every box costs $2.25, and then figure out what 15 boxes cost. Or if I know 5 cost $11.25, how much would 15 of them be? How many sets of 5 would that be? What would be the cost of 15 boxes of cookies? If you came up with $33.75, that would be correct, because you could either take the price per box and multiply it by 15 boxes, or you could take the 5 boxes, which cost $11.25, and multiply them by 3, because if you take 5 boxes and times it by 3, you get your 15 total boxes. So this would also be $33.75. Last one. On Mondays, Jada runs between 2 and 5 miles. Here's the key, between 2 and 5. You want to look at these inequalities and figure out which one shows the number in the middle being between 2 and 5. So it has to show that it is going to be bigger than 2 but smaller than 5. Which two show it being bigger than 2 but smaller than 5? If you said A and C, you would be correct, because notice that this is saying that the number in the middle is going to be bigger than 2, but it's going to be smaller than 5. And that's how we would show between 2 and 5. So on Monday, Jada ran between 2 and 5. So this Monday is what is kind of in the middle that we need to represent. On Tuesday, she runs 3 times as far as she runs on the previous Monday. Which inequality can be used to find x, which is not Monday, but actually how far she ran on Tuesday? So like if I ran 3 times as much on Tuesday as I did on Monday, if I ran 12 miles on Tuesday, how far would I have ran on Monday? Well, I would do 12 divided by 3, and I'd find out I only ran 4. Or if I ran 9 miles on Tuesday, which is 3 times as much as I did on Monday, I divide by 3 to find I only ran 3 on Monday. Every time we're taking however many we did on Tuesday and dividing it by 3. And we know that number's got to be between 2 and 5, so that means our answer would be C. I'm taking the amount on Tuesday and dividing it by 3 in order to figure out Monday. Hopefully this was a nice review, gave you some tips. You were able to kind of follow through and look at how we solve those problems. Notice for most of these problems, I wrote things down. As you approach and take the MCAs, it's really important that you're using the scratch paper and writing things down. Slowing it down and being able to see it definitely adds to the ability to get the answers correct. Have a great day.